Welcome to NTD Good Morning. Here are today's top stories. The battle over funding for immigration enforcement continues. A House panel has voted to bring a funding bill to the floor, setting up a key vote today. The Trump administration is focusing on solving an addiction crisis in America. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. explains the administration's new addiction recovery plan. China under scrutiny after a global baby formula recall is tied to a Wuhan Biotech supplier. Europe moves to tighten safety limits. Investigators are expressing grave concern following the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie. And you may have seen it. You start to type a text on your phone, and then the software begins to make auto-suggestions. Sometimes helpful, but could that underlying technology be compromising your privacy? Our guest explains. And days before the championship game, the New England Patriots and Seattle Seahawks met with the media during Super Bowl opening night, the traditional start to game week festivities.
This is NTD Good Morning, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here are Stephanie Cox and Carrie Dunst.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. Today is Tuesday, February 3rd, and of course, you're watching NTD Good Morning. In today's top news, the battle over funding for immigration enforcement continues in Congress. A House panel has voted to bring a funding bill to the floor, setting up a key vote today. With a very slim majority in the House, Speaker Mike Johnson can afford to lose only one Republican on the vote. Top Republican leaders say the bill must advance despite internal disagreements over the bill passed by the Senate. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley brings us the details.
The House is processing a government funding package that would end the partial government shutdown that began over the weekend. The package was passed by the Senate on Friday, and for the year, it funds all federal agencies except one. The Department of Homeland Security only has a 2-week continuing resolution, or CR. That maintains its current funding levels while Congress continues to negotiate on policies related to immigration enforcement. President Trump's urging a quick passage in the House without any changes. He says he'll sign it immediately to reopen the government and avoid a shutdown. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, meanwhile, is confident Republicans can pass it mostly on their own, despite slim margins and Democrat opposition.
Well, let's say I'm confident that we'll do it at least by Tuesday. We have a logistical challenge of getting everyone in town, and because of the conversation I had with Hakeem Jeffries, I know that we've got to pass a rule and probably do this mostly on our own.
But House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries says Homeland Security needs dramatic reform.
The American people want to see the mask come off. The American people want to see body cameras turned on and mandated. The American people want to see judicial warrants.
Congressional Democrats are demanding policy changes, adding body cameras to every ICE officer. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said Monday that that's already underway. With more funding from Congress, she says it will be expanded nationwide.
That wasn't my decision. I would have, I leave it to her. They generally tend to be good for law enforcement because people can't lie about what's happening.
One of the most controversial policies Democrats are pushing for, though, is not allowing ICE agents to wear masks.
There are people out there who mean these agents harm, and not only them, but their family members. And if they can find out where they live, that's dangerous.
A full House vote's expected on this package on Tuesday, and if it passes, most agencies reopen, but the DHS only gets 2 more weeks of funding, setting up intense talks on ICE policies. And this could be the first time in years that Congress passes 11 of 12 appropriations bills, with a short CR on that last one. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
And thanks to Jack for that report. Joining us now to discuss the partial government shutdown over DHS and ICE funding is public policy analyst Michael Busler, who's a professor of finance over at Stockton University, and political strategist Gene Valentino. He's host of the podcast Grassroots Truthcast. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining. Michael, starting with you, it seems like Speaker Johnson is confident that he can get the 2-week extension done without any collaboration from the Democrats. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I certainly hope he's right. And actually, it's not 2 weeks. I think it only lasts till February 13th, which is really only 10 days. I'm not sure what'll happen between now and February 13th. It's good that we have the vast majority of the government funded. But DHS includes more than just border enforcement and ICE. It also includes FEMA. And with some of the bad weather we're having, particularly snows in much of the country, FEMA may be called in and they have to be funded. So I hope this passes today. I think the Republicans can only afford to lose one vote. It looks like no Democrats are going to vote for it. I hope it passes today, and I hope that they can come up with something by February 13th so we don't have any kind of another shutdown.
Yeah, important points in that it's not a full 2 weeks, as you point out, only to the 13th. And also that it's not just specific to ICE, it does affect FEMA and other really important services at what seems like a pretty crucial weather moment. Gene, your thoughts on if this will go through without Democratic collaboration today?
Well, the probability is higher that it will, and let's hope Mike Johnson's correct and things are as optimistic as he claims. The truth of the matter is, on a broader scale, this should not be such a partisan party line issue each and every year. The House of Representatives and the Senate need to take a stronger examination of themselves, not ICE and other peripheral matters, and take a hard look at how they're operating to complement what my co-guest just said. We shouldn't be in these stressful deliberations each and every year. We have so many more important things to deal with.
And Gene, staying with you on that topic, specific to what they're debating on, there are already some compromises here. Noam says she wants body cameras and she's just waiting for the money to clear, and then they're going to deploy them. And you heard the president say that the police prefer to have those body cameras. But in terms of removing masks and the judicial warrants, that seems like where the rubber will meet the road. What are your thoughts on what will happen? Not just today, because clearly they're just trying to keep the government open, but over the 10, not 14 days, as Mike pointed out. What do you think will happen?
Oh, isn't this funny? It's just a few years ago, when you talk about masks, it was supposedly some mandated protection we were going to receive for from the COVID virus. Today, the word mask means hide the identity of the ICE agent. And why is that so? It's so because there's a threat against the ICE agent and his family. And why is that? It's because we are going into communities legally to extricate individuals legally and authorized to do so, to remove them from this nation legally because they have violated the law. And they just don't want retaliation or retribution against themselves or their families. Now, instead, the House of Representatives and related left-wing groups are trying to go after and intimidate the very people that are hurting this nation. And we need to stop this immediately. I pray that there's some legislation that comes along to penalize anybody, whether it's an elected official or other law enforcement agencies, from trying to stop a duly authorized group, ICE agents, in protecting this nation by getting these villains out of the country.
And I want to pivot over to you, Michael, from the economic perspective. Noam mentioned that the budget, under scrutiny, has the funding for the body cameras. So in a way, delaying the vote is preventing them from getting what they're asking for. But it seems like everybody's in agreement that body cameras are good, they need to be funded, and they need to be distributed for everybody's sake. But are there other economic aspects of this extension that should be highlighted in your view?
Well, everything else has been resolved. The other issue that we haven't heard too much about, and I believe it's been resolved, was the extension of the Affordable Care Act subsidies that were passed in 2021 and were set to expire at the end of 2025. The only purpose of that was during the pandemic, the unemployment rate shot up to almost 15%. And typically, it's the lower income people that feel this more than everyone else. So Congress, being compassionate, said, look, we'll cover more of your health care payment than we do now, at least until everybody gets back on your feet. Well, back on your feet, they gave it till 2025. The unemployment rate, although it's inched up a little bit recently, is still at close to a full employment level. And considering the federal government is $38 trillion in debt and running up nearly $2 trillion per year deficit to add to that, government spending has got to be reduced. And every time they come up with a way to cut government spending, somebody has a problem with it. Well, one way to cut it is we don't need to extend these additional subsidies. So that was a big holdup last time. I'm not sure how it was resolved. The House agreed to a 3-year extension. The Senate, I believe, agreed to a 2-year extension. So I'm not sure how that finally got resolved. But overall, shutdowns are not good for the economy. We don't have the fourth quarter GDP number because the government shut down before. We don't have all the data. But when it comes in, I believe it will be very strong. The third quarter number was 4.3% growth. I think the fourth quarter could have been more than that. However, we don't know what the exact effects of the government shutdown were, and it could slow that down. Overall, we need the government to operate all the time. We need it to operate more efficiently and to stop spending money that they don't have. And we really have to take a stand on that. We can't kick the can down the road as we've done for the last 20 or 30 years. We have to address that now.
You bring up a really interesting point that, for the longest government shutdown, healthcare was central to that, and then it just sort of faded into the ether, and people really aren't talking about it. But now there's this new emergency, and clearly what is happening in Minnesota is concerning to all people, maybe for different reasons, depending on what side of the aisle they're on. So, Gene, I'd love to get your thoughts on that there's a new theatrical thing that is preventing the government from having its normal functioning. And you had earlier alluded to, that Congress just needs to work more efficiently. So how do you understand what's taking place at this moment?
Let's start with term limits for congressmen, a constitutional amendment for balanced budgets, audits on specific agencies, starting with the Department of Defense. Michael's point a minute ago was perfect. We've kicked the can down the road for so long, we can't do it anymore. It's really coming to a point of no return. So we need a balanced budget with audits in place. Let's start with the Department of Defense, and we can easily balance the budget. All of a sudden, cameras for ICE agents become a non-issue. It's such a small item in the scheme of things. We really need to get our budget balanced. And this is where government activity or government behavior interferes with an economy. It interferes with the speed of incentives that go to industries and sectors that help stimulate jobs and growth. This is why we need to do it immediately. I think there's a direct relationship. The faster government steps away from spending, the opposite is true. We will see growth and prosperity accelerate geometrically, and therefore the paying down of that egregious debt that's accumulated over the decades.
Well, appreciate your insights there, Gene Valentino, and Michael Busler as well. Thank you for joining us this morning, gentlemen.
My pleasure.
Take care.
And a federal judge has lifted an order that had required federal officials to preserve evidence in the fatal shooting of Alex Pretti. The temporary restraining order had been issued just hours after federal agents in Minneapolis shot Pretti last month at the request of state and county authorities. Judge Eric Tostrud said the record now shows federal officials are unlikely to tamper with evidence as this case proceeds. State officials had complained they were denied access to the scene despite obtaining a court order. The judge acknowledged evidence may have been lost early on, but attributed that to safety concerns at the scene. Separate federal reviews into the shooting are also underway by the Justice Department as well as by the FBI. And oil prices are easing as President Trump says he believes Iran is negotiating seriously with the U.S. That's as the president announces a new trade deal with India to curb their reliance on Russian oil. And the president unveiling a $12 billion critical mineral reserve to counter dependence on China. NTD's Washington correspondent Mari Otsu has more on that.
President Trump has a lot on his plate, from foreign affairs to domestic issues. He had a call with India's Prime Minister Modi. He said that they spoke about wide-ranging issues from trade to ending the war in Russia and Ukraine. President Trump's now announcing that India will stop buying Russian oil and instead will start buying more oil from the U.S. and from Venezuela. He's also announcing that the U.S. will immediately reduce their tariffs on India from 50% to 18%, while India then reduces their tariffs on the U.S. to 0. President Trump says Modi has also committed to, quote, buying more American, in addition to committing to over $500 billion worth of investments in U.S. agriculture, technology, and coal. Meanwhile, President Trump also unveiling a $12 billion critical mineral reserve called Project Vault in his effort to curb dependence on China's rare earths. Take a look.
Just as we have long had a strategic petroleum reserve and a stockpile of critical minerals for national defense, we're now creating this reserve for American industry, so we don't have any problems.
Project Vault combines $10 billion in export-import bank financing and $2 billion in private sector financing, and the president says he expects taxpayers to make a profit from the interest on the loan used to start the initiative. Meanwhile, U.S.-Iran nuclear talks are planned for Friday, as President Trump has repeatedly urged Iran to make a nuclear deal.
We have ships heading to Iran right now, big ones, biggest and the best, and we have talks going on with Iran. We'll see how it all works out.
This comes a few days after the U.S. Treasury sanctioned Iranian regime officials for violent repression and corruption. In other words, for their brutal crackdown on anti-regime protesters. He says he's told Iran it has to do two things to avoid military action as the U.S. builds up its forces in the Gulf: no development of a nuclear weapon and to stop killing protesters.
The president's been clear from the beginning, as he was before Midnight Hammer. Iran will not have nuclear weapons capabilities. And so they can either negotiate on that front or we have other options. That's why the War Department exists.
Meanwhile, in the fallout of former Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro's capture, President Trump says the U.S. may make a deal with Cuba.
Cuba's a failing nation. It has been for a long time, but now it doesn't have Venezuela to prop it up. So we're talking to the people from Cuba, the highest people in Cuba. We'll see what happens.
This coming just a few days after President Trump declared a national emergency over Cuba, threatening tariffs on nations that provide oil to the communist regime. In the order, he blasts the regime for harboring adversaries, spreading communist ideology across the hemisphere, persecuting dissidents, and threatening U.S. national security. The order says Cuba aligns itself with, quote, numerous hostile countries, transnational terrorist groups, and malign actors adverse to the United States, naming China, Russia, Iran, Hamas, and Hezbollah.
Mexico is going to cease sending them oil. So I'd like to take care of the people that are here from Cuba. You know, we have many people that came from Cuba that were thrown out of Cuba or that fled Cuba. I mean, they came over on rafts. They went through shark-infested waters.
Thanks to Mari for that report. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio is hosting the inaugural Critical Minerals Ministerial in Washington with delegations from more than 50 nations. The gathering tomorrow is focused on strengthening and diversifying the global critical mineral supply chains that are tied to economic and national security. Ahead of the summit, countries are being asked to commit to a non-binding framework on sourcing and processing. The framework outlines coordinated policies to accelerate investment and reduce reliance on China. And next, President Trump is set to meet with his Colombian counterpart, Gustavo Petro, today at the White House. The talks aim to repair strained bilateral ties after a year of public clashes and political differences. Ahead of the meeting, Trump said he's looking forward to seeing him, adding the Colombian president has, in Trump's words, quote, changed very much. Trump said yesterday the two leaders are going to be talking about drugs coming out of Colombia. Petro's Washington agenda also includes political, academic, and business events. And coming up, freezing temperatures have gripped much of the East Coast. It's leaving communities digging out from record snow and icy roads. And the Trump administration is investing $100 million in addiction recovery. Health Secretary RFK Jr. unveils what the Great American Recovery Plan entails. And China under scrutiny again after a global baby formula recall is tied to a Wuhan Biotech supplier. Ominous. Europe moves to tighten safety limits. We're going to have those stories. We'll be right back. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Carrie Dunst. A dangerous blast of Arctic air is gripping much of the eastern U.S. after that powerful weekend storm. A bomb cyclone buried parts of the Carolinas in record snow. while millions are still dealing with the brutal cold and the dangerous travel conditions. NTD's Christina Corona brings us more.
From the Gulf Coast to New England, more than 150 million Americans faced extreme cold over the weekend. New York City is in its 11th straight day below freezing, a streak that could become the longest in city history. Mayor Zohran Mamdani says the city remains under a code blue emergency, expanding outreach and shelter access.
As of this morning, 16 of our fellow New Yorkers have passed away outside during this brutal stretch of cold. In 13 of these cases, preliminary findings indicate that hypothermia played a role.
In North Carolina, a bomb cyclone dumped historic snowfall, with some towns seeing up to 18 inches. Governor Josh Stein urged residents to stay off the roads.
For your own safety and for the safety of the people clearing the roads, please stay at home if you possibly can. This is no joke. This weekend, we saw more than 1,000 collisions, including 2 fatalities, and a major traffic jam.
The storm delayed travel nationwide, with over 2,800 flights canceled Saturday. Recovery continues from a previous storm. Tens of thousands remain without power in Tennessee and Mississippi. At least 119 storm-related deaths have been reported nationwide since late January. The worst of the cold will ease this week, though highs will stay 5 to 15 degrees below normal, with light snow possible midweek from the Ohio Valley into the mid-Atlantic. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Thanks to Christina for that report. And the search continues for Nancy Guthrie, mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie. Homicide detectives were sent to Nancy Guthrie's home after she went missing over the weekend. She's not been located, and investigators are expressing grave concern. Here are the details about this case.
Police in Arizona making a bold claim Monday. They say Today Show host Savannah Guthrie's mother, 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, is no accident. It's a crime.
I want to stress to you, and it is really important, Miss Guthrie, Nancy Guthrie, is of great sound mind. This is not a dementia related. She is as sharp as a tack.
Guthrie was last seen in her Tucson, Arizona home on Saturday night. When Guthrie did not show up to church Sunday morning, a church member called her family.
At some time earlier that morning, they got a call from somebody at the church who said, "Hey, your mom's not here." The family went to the house.
Investigators say that it does not appear that she left the home on her own, and they found her cell phone. Police say they also found evidence that suggests a crime had been committed and saw things at the home that were, quote, concerning.
There were circumstances on scene that we believe are suspicious in nature, I think is the best way to put it.
They would not say what that evidence is, although they did say they don't have any indication that the public is in danger. Police say they are canvassing the area and are looking for security camera footage to help with the investigation.
And an added concern in their race against the clock, Guthrie is said to have mobility issues and is also without her key medication, daily medication that she needs to survive. In a statement, Savannah Guthrie thanked law enforcement. She also said she appreciates the messages of support that she's received. And moving on now, the Jeffrey Epstein fallout continues. Former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton have agreed to testify in a congressional investigation tied to the convicted sex offender. A House Democratic lawmaker says the couple could appear before investigators within the next few weeks, a move that may head off a planned contempt vote in the House. The Clintons had previously criticized the Republican-led probe as partisan, but a spokesperson yesterday says they now plan to cooperate after negotiations over the terms of the testimony. Committee leaders have pushed for a longer in-person deposition in Washington. Democrats say the Clintons have now accepted those conditions. It remains unclear whether lawmakers will still move forward with a contempt vote later this week. And the Trump administration is focusing on a new approach to treating addiction with its Great American Recovery Plan. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. yesterday explained what that's going to involve. Here's more from Kennedy.
Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on Monday went into the details of the Trump administration's new addiction recovery program. President Trump last week signed an order creating the Great American Recovery Plan. At its core, the plan will consist of a $100 million investment in tackling homelessness issues and opioid addiction, as well as improving public safety. This will be done by focusing on safety through recovery, engagement, and evidence-based treatment and supports, or STREETs. Kennedy says the plan aims to connect those experiencing addiction with the community.
Addiction is about isolation. It's a disease of isolation. Addicts end up alone. They burn their relationships. They lose their jobs. They end up in rooms or jails or institutions or dead. And the ultimate solution to that is reconnecting people to community.
The initiative will coordinate a national response across government, healthcare, faith communities, and the private sector. Kennedy criticized the existing framework, saying its response to addiction is fragmented.
But the system itself is designed to keep you sick. Every time you relapse, the rehab makes more money, and the costs go up.
The Department of Health and Human Services says addiction or substance use disorder has risen sharply in the last few years, and it says nearly 8 in 10 people with a substance use disorder in 2024 did not receive treatment. Kennedy said that when becoming isolated, we lose access to an important source of healing.
And when we cut off our relationships with other human beings, we lose that access to the divine, and that is a healing power. We are in a spiritual malaise in this country, and we need to give people access to all different ways of reconnecting with something that is higher than themselves.
Kennedy emphasized, with addiction, early intervention is key to prevention. He said it's important to identify children who could fall into patterns of addiction.
We need to start doing the interventions then, when there's still neuroplasticity in their brains, before they've internalized the pathology and locked themselves into behaviors that are very, very difficult to break later on.
Kennedy also announced a $10 million grant for the assisted outpatient treatment for adults with serious mental illness who are unlikely to be able to live safely in their community. His department describes this as a civil court-ordered outpatient mental health treatment program. It's modeled around community-based treatment as an alternative to what HHS says are more costly restrictive levels of care and interactions with the criminal justice system.
And next, China is under scrutiny over contaminated baby food. A global infant formula recall has traced its source to a biotech company in Wuhan, China. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on the case and the new steps to address it.
3 major dairy groups, Nestle, Lactalis, and Danone, pulled baby formula products over concerns about cereulide, a toxin made by a food poisoning bacteria. The French Agriculture Ministry said a Chinese company, Biotech, was the producer of arachidonic acid, or ARA oil, at the source of the contamination, according to a Reuters report. Nestle says it has recalled infant formula in nearly 60 countries, one of the largest recalls in its history. Brands affected include SMA, Beba, Nan, and Alphamino, with national alerts issued across Europe, Latin America, Africa, the Middle East, and the Asia-Pacific region. Health officials say symptoms tied to the toxin can include vomiting, diarrhea, or unusual lethargy. Signs may appear within 30 minutes to 6 hours after exposure and typically resolve within 24 hours. Biotech is a major supplier to both international dairy companies and leading Chinese producers, highlighting the global reach of the supply chain. Europe is now tightening its response. The European Food Safety Authority has advised a new maximum threshold for the toxin cereulide in infant formula, proposing a limit of 0.014 micrograms per kilogram of body weight for infants. The agency says very young babies process substances differently and require added protection, with vomiting identified as the key short-term symptom used to set the guideline. Some French producers have already withdrawn additional products following the recommendation. Infant formula safety remains a sensitive issue in China after the 2008 melamine scandal, which affected an estimated 30 million children. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Thanks to Daniel for that report. And world leaders, advocates, and faith communities are gathering in D.C. for the International Religious Freedom Summit. Its goal? To assess the state of religious liberty in 2026, as well as identify where it faced the greatest risk. NTD's Chris Bobb has more.
At the International Religious Freedom Summit held in Washington, D.C., a panel described on Monday how early signs of religious persecution can become normalized. Specifically, panelists examined how patterns of repression can become embedded in laws, practices, and daily life. They cited the Chinese regime as an example.
It first starts off with the same playbook. You have propaganda, and then it starts going into the courts. Police start getting, bounty rewards for catching religious believers, and then it goes all the way to the prison systems and even to hospitals with organ harvesting. I think sanctioning the Chinese officials as far down the rung that we can go is an important step. As long as they're local, they're somewhere in the county level, I think that hurts a lot harder than if you go after Xi Jinping. If the persecution of Falun Gong stopped when he was imprisoned and when international media and eyes were on him, then Simon Zhang's mother would still be alive, and Peng Xun would still be alive as well.
The IRF co-chairs warn that when a regime like the Chinese Communist Party normalizes these red flags, people of faith face severe and lasting harm.
Red flags appear pretty early. You start to see governments make statements about certain groups as being, oh, this is questionable, or they start tilting their media. It's like they're preparing their society and their country to persecute this group.
Whether it is in a country like China, the normalization of the persecution, for example, of the Falun Gong community, or Uyghur Muslims, or Tibetan Buddhists. When you get the larger population to lose their sense of shock and outrage and repudiation of that kind of hatred, that's when you can really sort of persecute and harm a vulnerable minority with a lot of impunity.
They also shared how the United States can respond.
We can use global Magnitsky sanctions against individuals and leadership. You can use broad sanctions against the entire government, or you can even go as far as what President Trump did in Nigeria and bomb places.
The summit continues Tuesday, and organizers are already looking ahead to Wednesday's Congressional Advocacy Day, when participants will take their message to Capitol Hill. They're planning to do so through briefings, a public press conference, and meetings with lawmakers focused on protecting victims of religious persecution. From Washington, D.C., Chris Bobb, NTD News.
Thanks to Chris for that important report. And coming up, Ukraine says a U.S.-brokered energy ceasefire is continuing to have positive effects. We'll look at what Russia is saying about the upcoming trilateral. And from Vancouver to Toronto, Canadian protesters say daily life is getting harder and more expensive. They're also warning against the political risks that are connected to the Chinese Communist Party. We're going to have that and more. We'll be right back. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Kerry Dunst. Ukraine says a U.S.-brokered energy ceasefire is continuing to have positive effects. And the U.S., Ukraine, and Russia are now set to have a second round of trilateral talks this week. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar brings us more.
Temperatures in Kyiv are freezing, dropping to -7 degrees Fahrenheit. President Trump thus requested Russia to stop attacking Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Such attacks often leave thousands without heating in their apartments, having to bear frigid temperatures. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the ceasefire is still in place and has a positive effect.
There were no attacks targeting infrastructure, and this demonstrates that when the United States has the motivation to genuinely change the situation can indeed change.
Ukraine's largest private energy company still needs a break from months of Russian attacks to restore its damaged facilities.
That's why I think that energy ceasefire is extremely important for us to recover partly and avoid any tragic consequences because of no power supply.
The work is currently being complicated by bitterly cold temperatures as machinery is coated in frozen layers. The US, Russia and Ukraine are set to hold the second trilateral meeting in Abu Dhabi on Wednesday and Thursday. A Russian spokesman says the three sides have made some progress so far.
It is a very complex, multi-directional process. On some issues, we have certainly come closer. But there are issues where it's more difficult to find common ground. Unfortunately, there is no alignment there yet.
He added that the Russian side remains interested in trying to find a settlement to end the fighting in Ukraine. But for now, the fighting continues. A Russian drone strike on the Ukrainian city of Dnipro hit a bus, reportedly killing 15 civilians. The victims were employed by an energy company that owned the bus. And local officials say Russia also struck a city in central Ukraine. The State Emergency Service reported that civilian infrastructure, houses and cars were damaged in the attack. Arian Pastor, NTD News.
Thanks to Arian for that report. And what happens north of the border can affect Americans too, especially on trade and security. Over the weekend, rallies took place in several Canadian cities, with residents voicing growing anxiety over the economy as well as the rising cost of living. Here's more on that.
Canada free! Canada free! Canada first! Canada first!
Life is more expensive than ever before. We have long lines at food banks. There are no jobs right now either. So that's a really dangerous situation.
Houses are extremely expensive. It's very hard to get a mortgage.
Healthcare is broken. Then they did this crazy experiment here with legalizing really hard drugs. The country has gone straight down the hill.
In Canada, I'm finding a lot of our rights are being infringed upon. They're taking rights away. They're taking away our access to information, and they're controlling the narrative. The reduction of our rights, the reduction in the access to information, all these things are very troubling, and they are eating away at what I feel democracy is.
Protesters also pointed to the government's trade ties with the Chinese Communist Party, warning of hidden political risks and urging Canada to stand firm on democratic values.
His New World Order is to bring in communism and to make deals with every other country but the country that we should be having our deal with, which is the United States. Most of our economy is attached to that country. All of our jobs and our security is attached to. We are more aligned with the United States than any other country in the world.
The communist government, they're not our friends. I'm sorry, they're not our friends. As far as I'm concerned, that's a dictatorship there too, right, in China. So we want to make deals with a dictator? I don't think so.
From the economy and immigration to core values, people at the rally said they're worried about the direction Canada is heading.
You know, I'm standing here for my kids and my grandkids, because if we don't watch out, there will be no Canada left, in my opinion. Every country has a deal with Trump except Canada. Why? Let's work together. Let's get the ball rolling and, get the pipelines going. We have to make money. Healthcare, benefits, they don't come for free. We need revenue.
We need thoughtful, measured immigration. We want Canada to stay a peaceful country.
NTD News, Canada.
And as tensions in Iran continue, tens of thousands across Canada are raising their voices. Protesters in Toronto and Vancouver now demanding that Western allies do more, calling for maximum pressure to end Tehran's bloody repression once and for all.
Defying the extreme cold, a 100,000-strong crowd gathered in Toronto against Khamenei's totalitarian regime and violent repression.
There has been a massacre in Iran in the past few weeks. Tens and tens of thousands of people has been killed. This is a crime against humanity. This is a humanity crisis that is going in Iran.
Right now, more than 10,000 people are in jail and they are waiting for execution. And we are looking for help from the other governments, basically from US, all European countries, and mostly from President Trump.
Many countries like China, like Russia, they are the absolute beneficiary of the current regime in Iran, and they continue to support this murderous regime.
Most of the people that are actually taking all the wealth and are controlling the economy are people that are government officials. It's unfortunate for the regular people that are, working hard, and they can't bring meals to their tables. They can't pay for the homes, for their rent. So.
What do we want?
In western Vancouver, torrential rain couldn't stop thousands of Iranians from rallying. Holding signs high, they demanded regime change to win back their country's freedom.
What people want, which is regime change in Iran. People no longer want Islamic Republic.
King Reza Pahlavi return our home, Iran, and we will make a transition kind of government to have a voting system. We want to be able to vote. We are here and we will fight to the end.
We only need freedom, not more. We have a good country. All of Iranians supporting King Reza Pahlavi. We definitely support him.
This man is going to be in Iran soon, and we all believe that.
As the EU blacklists the IRGC, Western allies are ramping up sanctions. Protesters now urge even tougher action until the regime falls and Iran is finally free.
That was a good step, but it's not enough. We need an action and military intervene to my country to help my people to free and put the end to this killing regime.
We want support from UN, we want support from Canada, we want support from USA, and we want military action.
Please stop being silenced. Your silence means more people getting killed.
NTD News, Canada.
And up ahead, new concerns emerging over privacy and AI, particularly with your text messages. We're going to be joined after the break by the CEO of a tech company to explain what's going on and some potential things that you can do to protect your own privacy. And days before the big championship football game, the New England Patriots and the Seattle Seahawks met with the media during Super Bowl opening night. The traditional start to game week festivities. We're going to have that. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Kerry Dunst. You may have seen it. You type a text message on your phone, and then you start getting these auto suggestions. Sometimes it's super helpful, but it could that underlying AI technology be compromising your privacy? Joining us to discuss is Tanner Haas. He's CEO of Freedom Chat. Tanner, thanks for joining us this morning. Like most things, when there are new benefits, there are new costs, though it never occurred to me that the auto features that help you write text messages could actually be exposing you to new privacy concerns. So what should people be aware of in this regard?
Well, thank you so much for having me on, Kerry. You are absolutely right. People need to be aware that there is mass surveillance happening in this country, and AI is enabling that. So what's going on in these private messages that you have that are supposed to be end-to-end encrypted is you have AI actually analyzing every single one of your private messages. And most of the time, these models that Google, Apple, Meta, that they run are much too large to run on a single device. So what happens is this message that you send is decrypted, sent to their server so they can analyze it, and then it's sent back to your recipient's device. So we are quietly having our Fourth Amendment right, which protects Americans against unnecessary search and seizure. It's being violated, and really nobody's paying attention to how it's going on, how quickly it's come on. And I think it's honestly, it's a crisis that we need to pay attention to.
Now, Tanner, in my understanding, when there's something that isn't exactly as it's presented, there's potentially two outcomes. One is that the technology companies say that the encryption exists to sort of the mother brain, if you will, or sometimes they bury it in the very lengthy terms and conditions that people just have to click through to get to the services they'd want. Most people don't read those, myself included, unfortunately, just because they're too long, and you just want to get to the treat, if you will. So I want to understand from a privacy perspective, how is this actually taking place? Is it buried in the terms and conditions and people aren't aware of it? Or is it that the actual technology has changed and that hasn't been presented to the users?
Both, but you did hit it right on the head that it's presented in a 42-page terms of conditions, and 99% of people bypass that because they want the new emoji, they want the new update. And little did you know that you just signed away your private conversations, so AI can now analyze everything you say. And here's the severity of the issue that people need to understand. If you really trust these big tech companies who have clearly shown, I mean, they're not partisan, right? They've banned President Trump from every social media platform. They clearly do not align with one party or do not align with both parties. So if you just signed away your private conversations, so now it knows who you talk to, when you talk to them, how often you talk to them, and now you couple that with mass surveillance, facial recognition, all of a sudden you know every single thing about a person. They know who I talk to, when I talk to them, where I go. This is a real issue that people need to be aware of, because right now the Fourth Amendment still exists on paper, but it does not exist in practice. And people need to wake up and realize, oh my gosh, what did I just do when I just updated my phone? Well, you just gave Apple, Meta, Google permission to read and analyze every single one of your conversations. What you thought you were sending to your wife that is private, no, just about every Meta contractor can now see that message.
Wow, that is certainly eye-opening. And I believe a similar thing happens with those speakers that people typically put in their kitchen. In the terms and conditions of those types of devices is typically, that those conversations that you're having can also be, used for whatever purposes that the provider wants to. So let's pivot over to Freedom Chat. How are you using privacy as product differentiation?
Well, at Freedom Chat, we believe privacy is a fundamental human right. And we don't just say that because talk is cheap. We live it out. So with Freedom Chat, we will not now, not ever have AI incorporated into your private messages, because as soon as AI enters the conversation, your privacy leaves. So at Freedom Chat, we have true end-to-end encryption, and that has taken on an ambiguous meaning recently, but end-to-end encryption is supposed to mean nobody under any circumstance can read your message except the intended recipient. On Freedom Chat, that's true. We have no commercial use of user data. We store no users' messages on our server. We prevent screenshots, screen recordings. We don't support linked devices. So a Signalgate that happened, it's likely that would not have happened on Freedom Chat. These other messaging apps that put on a persona, oh, we're private, we care about you, we care about your privacy. It's not accurate. Then remove the AI model from the conversation. Do not support linked devices. Do not upload every single one of my messages onto a server. So if you care about your privacy and you believe it's a fundamental human right, which it is, download Freedom Chat on iOS or Android and begin messaging privately, because it's not that you have something to hide. You have something to protect. What you text your wife, what you text your son, your husband, that's nobody else's business. And that's how it should be. Let's give privacy back to the people, and that's what we're doing at Freedom Chat.
Well, Tanner, I certainly hope that our audience will check out Freedom Chat, because it sounds like you're taking a different approach to privacy. I just have like 20, 30 seconds left, but I was hoping for people who, they just can't go beyond the pre-installed thing on their phone. Do you have any tips for those kinds of people in how they can be more privacy aware as we finish up?
Remove AI anywhere you can when it pertains to your privacy. Point blank, because anytime AI comes into the conversation, AI is trained on data. It needs more data. And the more data, meaning more invasive into your life, like who you talk to, where you go. This is how it starts as a helpful AI agent. But then that agent all of a sudden is run by a company that knows every single thing about you. And again, you couple that with this mass surveillance, with these camera facial recognition, and we have a constitutional crisis. So please remove AI anywhere you can from your private conversations if you want to keep your privacy.
Tanner, thank you so much for joining. Very eye-opening conversation, really important. Wishing you luck as well with Freedom Chat. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much for having me on, Kerry.
And NASA announced early this morning it would be delaying its mission to send 4 astronauts around the moon. This is after engineers at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida detected a hydrogen leak at the base of the Space Launch System rocket. It happened during the wet dress rehearsal, where elaborate launch day walkthroughs are conducted. NASA announced that it would forego February's launch window, and it's now aiming for dates in March, with additional dates potentially in April. Now, the Artemis 2 mission will be NASA's Space Launch Rocket System and Orion capsule's second trip to space, but the first time that they carry humans. The launch is expected to be a crucial stepping stone towards returning astronauts back to the surface of the moon. Now, the New England Patriots and the Seattle Seahawks kicked off Super Bowl festivities last night on opening night. Instead of the usual packed house atmosphere that draws thousands of fans, this year's toned-down event, it unfolded inside a room at the San Jose Convention Center. Some of the players and the head coaches shared their thoughts before the big game coming up this Sunday.
Well, again, I take great pride in coaching these guys and seeing these guys have success. It's why I do what I do. I enjoy watching guys improve. I enjoy watching guys take advantage of opportunities, and this certainly is a great opportunity.
I just, when you talk about the vision of our team, that it's like this. We want people to look at the city of Seattle, our community, our football team as something to be proud of, but something where we can bring people together, and get the best version of everybody involved. And people look at our team and say, how the heck do they get that done up there, And it takes everybody, so it's someone that can bring people together and go towards its common goal. Those are the things that you remember the journey, and all those relationships you build along the way is what makes it really special.
And the Seahawks are returning to the Super Bowl for the first time since they lost to New England in the championship 11 years ago in the Brady era. The Patriots, considered the underdogs in this matchup, they're pursuing a record 7th Super Bowl title and their first since 2019 after Brady left. The big game kicks off this Sunday at 6:30 p.m. at Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara, California. Certainly a lot to look forward to there. We got to end up the show here. Thanks for watching. I'm Kerry Dunst. I'll see you soon.